Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Vishnu Paramahamsa Rajagacharya Sisvadesi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sangha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Sri Radha Krishna Gova Govira Shama Kunda Radha Kuta Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadip Dham Ki Jai Ganga Jamuna Tulsi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Go Premanandi, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. So once again, today we have the association of His Holiness Bhanuswami Maharaj. So Maharaj is so kind and merciful on us, so that every week he is coming and blessing us here in our Bhakti Yoga Center. So let's welcome Maharaj heartily by loudly chanting three times Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Get anything on here? What's wrong? All that. So, though our culture is largely defined by modern science, a lot of it, that modern science also is a little bit outdated. It's actually, we're still using concepts from 100 years ago. And those concepts were established a few hundred years before that, largely by Newton and other people at that time. And due to the social atmosphere of Europe when modern science began, the science actually started out as an opposition to religion. That was the main Catholic religion at that time, mainly Catholic religion. So ever since the beginning of modern science in the Western world, science and religion have been having a little war. And science basically does not believe in religion, or puts it in another category of lesser intelligent study or whatever like that. There's been a conflict in Western society about this for a long time. However, if we look at the original scientists, they themselves were not so opposed to religion. So even Newton, he also believed in God. And he had the idea that because of the laws that he had discovered, he said there must be some sort of creator behind the whole thing. So in other words, there's an intelligence behind the universe and its laws, as expressed by his statements like this: "An elegant system of the sun, planets, and comets that could not have been arisen without the design and domination of an intelligent and powerful being." Yeah? That, of course, is not a perfect argument, perhaps, but at least he appreciated the idea that it looks as if there's something there, beyond simply some chance laws that arose on their own. So anyway, after his time, in the 17th century onward, science advanced quite rapidly, and of course you use the mind and one's logical abilities as well as observation to discover new principles and laws of material nature. And a lot of observations and conclusions were reached over a few hundred years. So this put the emphasis upon the logical mind and observation, and to the exclusion of everything else. And religion was not regarded as factual. And the real world was the world of science. So, in other words, knowledge itself was science, and religion and philosophy, etc., were secondary things which you could study, but were not real knowledge. And then we come to Darwin. Darwin also was very influential because, due to his theory of evolution, then there was an explanation for the intricacy of the world and of the living bodies. Because the argument is always given, well, how can chance create a living body, an animal or a human being? Very, very difficult, because we can't do that. And so then we say, okay, it must be a creator or something of the body. But then, through his theory of evolution, he had a rational explanation that due to random mutation, the creatures changed, and those which were more adapted to the environment at that time, they survived. And then when there was a new change in environment, then those which adapted to that by mutation, those are the ones that survived. So gradually there was evolution of bodies through genetic mutation, chance genetic mutation, so that you could get different species arising at different times. And thus you get different plants, and then different animals like aquatics, and then land animals and birds and mammals and reptiles, etc., all because of chance mutations. So this, therefore, ruled out the idea of a god. There was just a chance that everything arose like this over millions and millions of years. So that theory, of course, was contested by many people, but it gradually became acceptable. And in the early 20th century,
still, it was controversy whether they should accept it or not. And some people said we can't accept it, and we didn't want to teach it in schools. But then there was a famous trial in America over whether they could teach it in school, because some schools in southern U.S. were protesting, you cannot do this because it's against religion. But then the court ordered, no, they can teach it in schools. So it was even a controversy in the early 20th century. But finally accepted. And now we'll see around the world, probably even schools in the most undeveloped countries of the world will be teaching Darwin's theory of evolution. So over 100 years it's become like almost a fact, even though it's still a theory and it's not being proved. So things like this tend to make people believe that therefore there's an explanation in science for everything, including life. Darwin himself he would never say there is no God. So he was an agnostic. There may be, there may not be, I cannot say. That was his thing. But he definitely did say there was a God, but he never said there's no God. He wouldn't say that either. It says the mystery of the beginning of all things is insoluble to us. So there's a little bit of ambiguity of rational explanation for everything. But nevertheless, his theory, or more or less, was rational and it was some sort of explanation. So since that time, of course, there have been some doubt thrown upon that theory of evolution, because even mathematically speaking, it doesn't work out that for the whole existence of the Earth, how many years it's been in existence, and for the number of mutations that could take place in that time, you still can't get even the first primitive cells coming out at that time by laws of chance. If you just take, a big primordial soup and molecules and chemicals vibrating and all that, and making the first, let's say, amino acids, and amino acids have together and they have to form more complex things like a cell, one little cell, which is very complex actually. Even to do that is very, very difficult. So what to speak of developing advanced creatures over that same period of time when the whole Earth existed? Mathematically, of course, if you take the laws of chance in mathematics, it doesn't work out. That mutation itself, chance mutation, does not account for the variety within evolution over that short period of time of the whole existence of the Earth. So there are holes in the theory itself, so they modified that theory to some degree. But still, more or less, people accept that theory and it's taught in schools. So anyway, some scientists have also protested this idea that everything can be rationally explained. And some scientists have said we can't explain everything through science. There are problems in science itself. It's recognized by some scientists like Alan Orr, etc. So after Newton, then the big name in science was Albert Einstein. And he's very famous for his law of relativity and like that, and E equals mc squared and all this sort of thing. So again, he would not say there is no God. So again, he's an agnostic. At the same time, he did appreciate the fact that, like Newton, that somehow there was some sort of mysterious order within the universe. And he also understood, he talks about a superior mind, etc. Therefore, he had some little appreciation of something beyond science as we know it. There was not just all chemicals, there was something else there. So he says the most beautiful emotion we can experience is the mystical, it is the power of all true art and science. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. In this sense, and in this sense only, I belong to a rank of devotee religious men. So it's more or less, we can say, pantheistic, that there's some wonder about the whole universe, which we cannot really explain, but he won't say what it is, so, behind everything. So at least even there could be something there. Anyway, out of Einstein's work, then we get quantum mechanics. So this is a big step forward because it actually contradicts Newton. All the Newton principles are contradicted by quantum mechanics. So in other words, the absolute knowledge of science was challenged by science itself, because all the concepts are opposite. So it's a big problem in one sense. Yet, from this theory, we can do many things, so therefore it's accepted. Yes, it's true. At the same time, it's very difficult to correlate this theory with Newton's classical physics, because it's so contrary. So, it's accepted, but nobody can explain why it's like that, and why it's so contrary to Newtonian physics, which they also accept. So, science itself is a little puzzle. So for 100 years, science have been trying to solve this problem, how to explain quantum physics and why it's so opposite of the other, and it's also true. Nobody's come up with an explanation. So in other words, the logical mind has not been able to solve this problem in science itself. The basic problem. So in other words, science is not so absolute after all. Comes up logically with a counter theory, which is also seems to be true, and they accept it, and they can do things with the quantum theory in the modern world, but still they can't explain it. And why is the contradiction? So one of the problems in quantum physics is that things look a little relative, because everything depends upon an observer who is conscious. And if you observe things in one way as waves, they become waves. If you observe them as particles, they become particles. And according to classical physics, waves and particles are completely different. So how can something be a wave and then simultaneously be a particle? Or, depending on how you want to look at it. It sounds very strange. It doesn't look absolute anymore. Science is not so absolute. So the whole idea of an atom with the proton and the neutron and all this stuff in the middle, and then the electrons going around, that was traditional science, and then the two get together and they form a bond or something like this, and you get a combination of atoms together, and then you get molecules like H2O coming together, traditional science. It's all static. It's just those things here and these things linking together, the electrons sharing orbits or something like that. But actually it's not like that according to the modern picture. There is no orbits. It's all space, and it's all probability. It's nothing, we can't say the things are there at all in one particular place at one time. We can see them as particles, but then you can see them as waves, etc. The electron or the photon, you can see it as a particle, you can see it as a wave, depending on how you want to test it. So what is it? Is something in between or what? And all depending on consciousness. So up until this point, science did not accept consciousness as anything real, but according to this, they have to accept it. But how to accept it, that's a big problem, and how to define it in consciousness and science. So they've been struggling for 100 years. So very, very difficult. They've come up with a lot of theories. People make theories, and then another person will defeat that theory, contradict that theory, whatever. So then no one's solved the problem up until the present day. Hasn't been solved. Yeah? So you can test something and it can act like a particle. You test something, it looks like a wave. Same thing. Photon. It can do two things. It can be either. What is it? So, first they got little particles like electrons or photons to do this. They had this dual nature. Then they discovered that even compounds, atoms, and compounds of atoms did the same thing. So it wasn't just the electrons or single particles like photons that had this dual property, but even combinations of atoms displayed the same type of properties. So we're getting a little bigger. from the very small to a little bit bigger size. So therefore, even on a larger scale, reality was defined by the observer again. So again, observer is involved, some conscious entity is involved. From our point of view, not difficult, because we say there's a soul who is conscious, etc. From science, they don't accept a soul, so it's very difficult for them to explain what is this consciousness that's observing these atoms and combinations of atoms. So they tried to evolve various theories. Here we have Penrose and others. They have some real complex theories like this. You can read this, but and how you observe things and how consciousness arises through the neurons, etc. Whatever like that. So they have all sorts of theories. No one can really prove one is true or whatever like that, but they try to evolve some sort of theory and then discover how consciousness is produced through the neurons, etc. Like this, like that. So in this way, they were trying to explain scientifically about some conscious entity or a soul, etc. So in other words, they even admit, some scientists, that soul or whatever it is which is conscious can exist after death. But they try to explain it in terms of, something within the microtubules of the neurons or something like that. Anyway, some appreciation is there of some soul or something, but it's a very scientific and technical explanation if you don't know if it's true or not. So, but because of this theory of quantum physics, then many scientists have opened their consciousness a little bit and admitted there's something bigger than just gross matter. So something more than this level of Newtonian physics and just bare matter itself. Therefore it gets into this idea that there is some sort of like a soul, or the soul that goes beyond the body, etc. And scientists have done this. Of course, other scientists will reject this, and they're really stuck on not accepting soul, etc. But then some scientists will admit this, and these are not, these are advanced scientists also, so they'll admit something like a soul. Some become a little bit more spiritual, so to speak, but usually their spirituality is more inclined towards Buddhism than anything else. So David Bohm is one of those. So he talks about an inner, uniform, transcendental reality based on all external data and facts. And so he accepts consciousness. So there's some consciousness or something, and it's a universal consciousness, like that. Many scientists, are still part of the scientific mainstream, are no longer afraid to openly state that consciousness awareness could, in addition to space, time, matter, and energy, be a fundamental element of the world, perhaps even more fundamental than space and time. It may be mistaken to ban the spirit from nature. So that, they're putting forth this is a little bit more boldly. Some persons like this, some consciousness is part of the real world. Along with this, then the scientists have also made discoveries that actually most of the, using the present theories and whatever, when they calculate the whole universe, they discover that what we can see or perceive is like 4% of the universe, and the rest of it we don't even know about. It should be there, but we can't detect it. So we don't know what it is. So in other words, we get 4% of the whole universe we know about: protons, neutrons, electrons, quarks, gluons, etc., like this, and they make up, all the galaxies and things like this. 4%. But just according to the theory of science, there should be much more there, but they can only account for this amount. So what is the rest of the whole universe? Here's a little bit what we know about. So what do they call it? Dark matter and dark energy, which means we don't know. Something is mysterious, something is there that we cannot define. And then we know a little 4% or something like that. The green and the pinky one there, those are the parts we know about. The rest we don't know about at all. So then how certain is science after all? They admit that they don't know about most of the world. Addition to the matter part, then we have these forces like gravitational force, electromagnetic fields, etc., which are also a little bit mysterious how they work. And of course we have theories about it, but just what they are, nobody really knows. And time also. What is time? Science does not explain time. No one has given a real factual definition of time. They use it, but in their theories, but in their formulas, but no one's explained what it is. So how precise is science after all? We have to question because of that. If we look at the Bhagavatam and we see the composition of the whole universe, we see that it more or less correlates with this. Most of it you cannot see. We have some factors in the universe, time and karma, etc., which are non-physical things. Just like we have fields and stuff which are non-physical. Then we have matter. But we have subtle matter that you cannot see. Prakriti itself you cannot see. No one can detect it at all with any instrument. Mahatattva you can also maybe slightly detect because it is luminous. And we have ahankara mind, senses and sense objects. These also you cannot detect by material things. Then we come to ether, air, fire, water, and earth. In their pure forms, we also cannot detect them. We cannot perceive ether, or air, or fire, or even earth or water. When they combine together, then that's what we see in this world. So what we see in this world is some small combinations of these elements. But we don't see those elements in their pure form, nor do we see any of this other stuff. So that's our material world according to Bhagavatam. And of course, here we have the whole, all of the evolution of matter, etc., which is called Sankhya, enumerating everything here. Then we have the other part, which is more important, that is the consciousness part, which quantum physics is trying to deal with, but they can't quite conclude what it is. So according to Bhagavatam, consciousness is real, and it's more important than the unconscious matter itself. So we have the Atma, and there are innumerable Atmas, particles of consciousness, with a sense of I. They know things, they do things, they experience things, etc. So this is taken for granted. First fact of Bhagavad Gita is you're the Atma, you're not the body. So it's real, but non-material, beyond material perception. But furthermore, then we have the Supreme Lord behind that. So modern science, we see some scientists, okay, there is some supreme universal consciousness, something is there like that, where there's Atma or Lord, they don't quite know what it is, it's something, or they call it mind or whatever like that. So they may even be just back on this level here, back on the mind level over here, which is part of matter, some of them. Or some may get to the idea of Atma. Okay, there's some conscious something, but it's not well defined. Whereas in Bhagavatam we'll find that Atma is defined, and then Supreme Lord is also defined as a separate conscious entity, supreme conscious entity. So we got another type of conscious entity, the Supreme Lord, too. All right. So where do we get our knowledge from? We get it from Scripture. We can only know about Atma and Supreme Lord from the Scriptures. We cannot know it from observation and from logic, which is what science is trying to do. That is why there's a problem in modern science. Because they know that conscious something exists, but they're trying to analyze it with their mind and material senses, and it cannot be. So it's very difficult for them to solve that problem. So anyway, scriptures give us more information about it. And the whole purpose of scripture is not just to define what is real and what is unreal, and we have consciousness and matter, but to actually bring the consciousness of the human being to a higher level. So we realize we're not the body, and also we realize Supreme Lord. That's the whole goal. At which stage then we realize that the whole material world is not quite what we thought it was. It's something quite different. Therefore the whole goal of the scriptures is to elevate our consciousness to a higher level. What is the goal of science? What is the goal? Do they have a goal? Well, ultimately, I suppose they will say that so we can lead a better material life. We can enjoy nicely in the material world. So it's not a very elevated goal at all. So the whole goal of Scripture is to actually raise, nothing to do with the body, to raise the soul consciousness upwards, to realize higher and higher levels. And therefore, we find the very beginning of Bhagavad Gita, this is the emphasis. An intelligent human being should understand he's not the body, but he is the soul. So this is quite a different perspective on knowledge from scientific knowledge, which is just to observe the world and get more knowledge of atoms and protons or whatever like that. So the purpose, of course, of doing this, of getting this higher knowledge is and to get this higher goal is to, on one level, solve the problem of the human being. And the problem of the human being is suffering. So one of the goals is to get rid of that suffering. That we can say that, of course, is the goal of science also, but the goal of science in removing suffering is just to improve the material body and prolong life. That's their idea. The goal of Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita is to realize you're the Atma and get out of the material body. That's the solution. So it's quite a different solution. We can get knowledge of this from Scripture, but then we also have to get a realization. So not only we have to be aware that we're not the body, that we are the Atma, but then we have to realize that and live that. So this is a more difficult step. Of course, first step also just to accept the idea is maybe difficult. Second, then we have to realize it. And to do that is a very difficult process because the senses, the mind, intelligence, and false ego are pushing us in the opposite direction towards ignorance, identification with your body, and enjoyment in the material body. So that's why we get this problem. And that's why science really can't advance as long as they're pushed in this direction. So when the scientists become a little more sattvic, then they can start gravitating towards appreciating at least the soul. They can't appreciate God, but at least the soul or something they can appreciate when they become more sattvic. As long as the lower modes, then they'll be stuck into, a gross material logic, etc. So, difficult process. So that's, of course, explained in the Bhagavad Gita, where we see how you become attracted to sense objects, and then you get desire and attachment, and you get anger, and then you get bewildered, and you lose your memory, and then you fall back into the material world and commit sinful activities and get a lower body in the future as a result. So this is the hopeless position of people stuck in the material world in ignorance. They just completely rotate on a lower level of using their senses and mind to fulfill their desires, and therefore they just rotate from one material body to another, lust, anger, and greed, etc., and birth and death, whatever like this, and revolving in the world of samsara. So whole purpose of the Vedic literature and scripture is to get us beyond that level, to get us out of this cycle. So that we have the scripture, which we accept as the solution. So the scriptures give us different solutions based upon qualification. Different people have different qualifications. So those who are lowly qualified, that have not much interest in spiritual life, they simply want to live their life as materialists or whatever, for them they get the system of karma yoga. Follow some restrictions of the senses according to your qualification as tamasic or rajasic or sattvic, that is by varna. Follow different rules. And gradually, over many lifetimes, you can raise yourself in the gunas to sattva guna. So when you get to sattva guna, then you become qualified for another process called jnana yoga, philosophical inquiry based upon scriptures like Upanishad. And through this, one concludes that we are not the body, we are Atma. And then you have to realize that by vairagya, detachment from everything. A less philosophical process, and a more physical process, we could say, is to use the body and the mind and the senses to realize the Atma. That is the yoga process. Astanga yoga. So through meditation and the Astanga process, then one can also realize the Atma. Those who are more qualified can go beyond Atma and realize Supreme Lord and our relationship with the Supreme Lord. And this is the process of Bhakti Yoga. So this process is a little different from Jnana and Yoga. Jnana and Yoga depend a lot upon renunciation of desires, renunciation of senses and mind, etc., stopping all the impressions of the mind, etc. Process of Bhakti engages the senses and the mind in serving the Lord. So a little bit different process and consequently easier. Okay, so therefore we have two different ideas here. We have the scriptural idea where there's a prominence given to Atma and then Supreme Lord, and then we have material science, which is just trying to adjust things in the material world to make a better material life. And then some people will say, okay, there is some supreme thing, we can explain things by a supreme entity or intelligence or consciousness, but still the goal is not to get to that level, it's just to manipulate the material world more, that's all. The challenge, of course, for modern people, or the doubt maybe, is that, well, how can we believe those scriptures? So one answer is that we can say is the testimony of individuals, because individuals have confirmed that the scriptures are true. The great sages in the past, great acharyas, have confirmed it is true. How do we believe them? Well, they were not unintelligent people. They were not morons. They were highly educated, just like scientists are highly educated or whatever. So these people also were very, very advanced in knowledge, etc. And they testify that the scriptures are true. So based on that, we do. Similarly, science can also say, we can say the same thing about science. Why is it true? We see that there's controversy in science. They can't solve their problems also. Why should we believe it? Well, so many intelligent people accept it, so therefore we'll accept it. That's the answer, only answer you can give. But still, we know faults are there. 96% of the universe is still unexplainable. They don't know about it. So how factual is science then? So anyway, there is some confirmation, interestingly enough, some scientific confirmation of Atma at least. We can't say God, but at least Atma. And scientific confirmation is a little bit indirect also, because a scientist, if we want a normal, acceptable proof in science, it's a very rigorous process involving observation using your material senses. And so you have a whole way in which you carry out experiments and prove things in science. However, we can say that the way in which certain things are proved, or we can say there's evidence of a soul, is again by testimony of others, experience. So here we have Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist. He studied 2,600 cases of children who had recollections of past life. And he was an atheist. But then he was interested why children make up these stories or whatever, why they have these strange ideas in their head about a past life. So he investigated 2,600 cases. And then his conclusion was, they're telling the truth. They do have recollections of something, a previous experience. That was his conclusion. He couldn't doubt it. It was not cheating. Then, of course, how is it they get a recollection? The only answer is they go from body to body. So a consciousness is going from one experience in one body to experience in another body. So then he had to accept that fact of the soul going from body to body and accumulating experiences over many lifetimes. So it's scientific in the sense that he took cases and using scientific methodology, this methodology, he interviewed people and he would reject anything which was subject to doubt. But then on the basis of all the cases that he heard, then he came to a conclusion, which was the most likely explanation. And that is that there's a conscious entity going from body to body to body in these individuals. So therefore, he would accept the existence of a soul. Which is simply exactly what Bhagavad Gita is saying. So it's a confirmation of Bhagavad Gita. We go from life to life, and our consciousnesses can evolve and get higher and higher. Of course, it can also go the opposite way. It can also degrade, depending on our activities. And he also discovered that in Bhagavad Gita it says, whatever you think of when you die, you become that. So he found a remarkable correlation. And of course, we got this story of Bharat where he thought of a deer. He became a deer because he concentrated on a deer. So he found in his, this is something accidentally he discovered, but then he found it in many places in these children, that the birthmarks they have in this lifetime were a reflection of their accident and their death in a previous lifetime. So we see here the scars on this child's chest here, birthmark when he was born. And he remembered previous lifetime where he was shot by a shotgun in his chest. And this is the autopsy report in the previous lifetime with all the bullet hole wounds with one big one in the middle. So that same pattern appears in this lifetime on his chest as a birthmark. How did it transfer? Completely different family, genetics are different, whatever. And how can genetically something like this, an accident, genetically start doing things to your next body? You can't explain it. Nevertheless, it happened, it transferred. So just as the mind, what you fix in your mind can determine your body. So we can say the mental image got fixed on him and it imprinted the next body like that. He has many stories like this. This one, no fingers in the child. Previous lifetime, fingers got cut off by a farm implement. This lifetime, no fingers, no genetic explanation at all. No fingers. This one, a boy with no ear. Previous lifetime, gun shot his side of his head off, and the ear was blown off. This lifetime, no ear. Well, many examples like that he shows. Some previous death trauma on the body produced an effect on the next body. So, not explainable by modern genetics or anything like that. So, some people will appreciate that he did painstaking work, and objectively he did this, say at least you cannot ignore that data. It is something to think about, but still people are a little bit reluctant to come to a conclusion. So another area is a near-death experience where your brain is dead, but then you have memories. How is it possible? So people whose brains have stopped will have memories of who did the operation or things like this, or they have common experiences out of the body, leaving the body, traveling through some space-time, going into another world, feeling very peaceful, like they're in heaven, conversing with other people, seeing spiritual beings, getting information, seeing a life review, all their activities they've done in this lifetime, etc., and coming back. And it's common among so many individuals from different backgrounds, different religions, so the same experience like this. So difficult to explain in terms of, neuron reactions or chemicals of anesthesia or something like that. Why would they all have the same similar experience and whatever like that? So researchers have done that, and again they conclude, it looks like we don't die. There's something in the body which does not die and goes out of the body and goes into the other body, etc., like that. And we have many different researchers on near-death experience who've come to the same conclusion. Like that. So again, it's a secondary proof in one sense because testimony of individuals who have had experiences. And you can think, well, why do we have to believe them, that they're subjective, emotional, but then we get a whole series of cases like this. This is a little peculiar, and they have similar experiences. Then it looks reasonable to say they're not imagining things. So it's explainable in the Bhagavad Gita, all of this, because when the soul goes out of the body, they take the subtle body with them. And the subtle body has its senses and a mind. So therefore, even if the brain isn't working, the subtle body can work apart from the brain. And you can observe, and you can feel, you can think, you can have memories, etc., apart from the gross physical body. Okay? So the logical explanation is also there like this. So we're not only the gross physical body. As I said previously, science cannot really explain 96% of the universe. They see some gross matter like that. So even the human body, we have the gross body, then we have the subtle body with the can't see, which is also a complex system. And there's a soul behind that. So the subtle body can leave the material body, and it can observe things also. So that subtle body is quite interesting because it's a storehouse for all of your experiences and all your desires and all your impressions, even your physical features and the karma. So because the physical features are stored there, that's why you can become something in your next lifetime. The wounds at death are stored in your subtle body, and they will imprint so strongly in your next body that your physical body must correspond to that subtle body. So in your subtle body, your hand gets cut off. Physical body next lifetime, no hand. So physical features can be altered by the subtle body. And desire, and of course karma. So the impressions can continue. So your past experiences will influence this lifetime. Why? Because subtle body carries all those experiences. So if you drown in one lifetime, that experience of drowning, that fear of drowning in water, can carry you on into your next lifetime, your next lifetime, next lifetime. It can go on for many lifetimes, in fact.
Krishna, let us thank His Holiness Bhanu Swami Maharaj by 3 times loudly chanting Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. His Holiness Bhanu Swami Maharaj ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki. So today being Ekadashi, and also Maharaj